Good evening and welcome to our third talk on the prayer of St. Ignatius of Loyola called the Examen prayer. The first two talks, for reminder, for review, the first step is to remember that we're in the presence of God. Step two is to ask for the grace that we're seeking with regard to the Examen prayer. So that is to know, to be aware of how God has been present in our day. The way I phrase that myself, perhaps it would be helpful for you, is I ask God that I may see my day through his eyes. And so now, step three. For this evening's little talk, I'm going to combine step 3 and 4. I will clearly indicate which is step 3 and which is step 4, but step 3 is relatively brief in terms of explanation. So we'll combine for this evening 3 and 4. Step 3, after asking that we may see our day through God's eyes or be aware of how he's been present to us, step 3 is simply to remember your day of the past 24 hours. So you literally simply try to recall to your memory the events of the day. It could be interactions at home, on the bus, at work, among family, among friends, interactions with a stranger, interactions in general. It could be things from our prayer. It could be our own reflections. It could be things we saw while walking. In essence, it's basically everything that comes to our mind. And we also, as we remember those different instances of our day, we remember sort of the feeling we had or the movement of the spirits within ourselves, the movement of the Spirit within our hearts as that experience or that reflection or that prayer was occurring. So that's essentially step 3. It is remembering what has happened. It could be significant things, it could be sort of middle of the road things, or it could be things that we may view as being relatively insignificant. But we simply recall to our mind what has transpired in the past 24-hour period. With regard to doing this, again, because it's a 24-hour period, many people, or most people, will do it at the end of their day before going to bed. It doesn't have to be that way. Perhaps you're not so good in the late evening, that by the time bedtime comes, you really your mind isn't able, through fatigue, to give it that focus in the prayer. And so there's nothing that says it has to be done before going to bed. I knew a very saintly Jesuit who would do it after supper. After he finished his meal, he would go to the chapel or his room and he would do the Examen prayer. I also remember one of my superiors, Father Dave Schultenhofer. And Father Dave, because he was terrible at night but excellent in the morning, he would do it in the morning. And so he would review the past 24 hours, the 7 or 8 hours being in bed. But that would be the same if we did it at the end of the day as well. So again, for Ignatius, it is whatever is practical, whatever is helpful. We don't have to make our prayer unnecessarily difficult. Whatever makes it most conducive or feasible for us to do it in a consistent way. That's the time that's perfect for you. Now, step 4. Having brought to our minds the content of our past 24 hours, step 4 is more of a reflection on whether or not in those different experiences, again, significant, not so significant, or middle of the road, that those experiences of whether or not they brought one closer to God, or they made one seem in their hearts to drift farther from God. So were they experiences of consolation, or were they experiences of desolation? What brings me closer to God, or what brings me that feeling within myself farther from God, or we turn our back more on God. And so let's give an example. Just today, I had to have a root canal for, I think, the third time on the same tooth. There's no root there anymore, but to fill in the space where the roots were or what have you. And to pay for the treatment, I had to use my debit card. But because my debit card has a transactional limit, and the invoice for the work of the dentist was just above it, it became really difficult. Something that should have taken just, say, 3 minutes to do ended up taking 4 hours of the day, because you have to call the bank and you have to wait and speak with the person, what have you. And so I was reflecting on this experience. And normally, I would have reacted in the following way. So I would have grown in my impatience, but my impatience would have been due from my embarrassment of going to pay and then having my card declined. Not just once, but I think like 6 times. And so my embarrassment would make me blame others. I would be so self-conscious that everyone's looking at me because my card has been declined, that I would begin to point the fingers at others. I would say, this bank or this banking system makes no sense. Or when I left the dentist's office, I would say, gosh, their processes, we should be able to just invoice it, and I can mail it in later. All of that, basically what it is that I would blame other people. And so in that experience then, I would be moving away from God, because I would be impatient, I would be judgmental, I would be unjust to others, I would be uncharitable in my thoughts. However, thanks be to God, that's not how I reacted. And so in reflecting on my day, through not giving into the temptation I felt of embarrassment, but rather thinking to myself, well, it is what it is, so be it. And then what happened is that 2 people at the dentist's office were so understanding and so kind to me. And the person I had a phone at the bank, again, they were so kind and helpful. So we take an experience and we look at it. And we say, okay, I don't like the experience of becoming impatient or losing my temper or blaming others because of this or that. But rather, if I can just be myself, if I can seek to give a positive interpretation, and if I can allow other people to be kind and helpful to me, that maybe as an expression of humility, I can allow people to be kind and helpful to me. And what happens? People are kind and helpful. And so that's an example. Or maybe another example in which I felt myself moving away from God or turning my back on God. That one day, not too long ago, I didn't like how someone spoke to me. And because I didn't like how someone spoke to me, I thought about it the whole day. And then at some point, I was able to address it. And I addressed it in a way that was self-righteous. I dealt with it in a way in which I gave in to my temper, thinking, you spoke to me like this, well, wait till you hear how I speak to you. I can outdo you in my volume. And as soon as I was done, I felt sad and empty inside because I had turned my back on God. I didn't keep God at the center, I put myself at the center. And so then we realize it, and then we seek to make amends. We apologize. And we also remember that feeling we had, that sad or empty feeling. And we think to ourselves, I don't want to feel that anymore. Or at least I don't want to feel it as often as I have been feeling it. And so I work at it so that my life, I can cooperate more with God, that I can walk closer behind him, or that I can follow more consistently in the path that he has laid out for us. So again, those are just two examples. One in which I kept my actions and my words kind of in line with our Christian faith, and on the other one, I didn't. But the whole point of reviewing our 24 hours is that we see how God has been at work, how God is at work in oneself, how God is at work with the people around us, be they known or unknown, and how God is present in creation itself. Because, as Ignatius says, to see God in all things, it means that God is revealing, that God is communicating. And so for St. Ignatius, this prayer is really about listening, of listening more, of trying to have the scales removed from our eyes that we can see more, to listen, to see, to know how God is present, how God is active, how God is merciful and loving throughout every moment of our day. And so that's step 3 and 4. Step 3, simply recalling to our mind what has happened the past 24 hours and being aware of the feelings we had during those certain experiences. And then step 4 is more of the reflection, of reflecting on whether one turned more towards God or one turned away from God. Therefore, we see that he is present and active, loving and merciful. And through discernment, again, that God has a will for us, that God has a dream for us. And steps 3 and 4 help us very much to gain greater clarity of mind and heart of what God's will and dream is. Thank you and good evening.